Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the NSCAC Presents Behind the Bench. We have a special guest with us. We have Coach Garry Monk. He's the former captain of Swansea City. He's also the former manager at Swansea, Sheffield, and Leeds United. And he was also the Premier League Manager of the Month in August of 2014. Garry, welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you on today.
No, thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to it. And hopefully we can get some good two-way conversations going, and hopefully it's there'll be something for everyone to take out of it.
And we are definitely looking forward to it. So today's topic is transitioning from player to coach/manager. So Coach Garry's had the opportunity of being a professional player, and then he's also coached at the various professional levels. So he's going to have a presentation for all of us, and we can have a discussion if there's any questions out there and on what that transition looks like. Coach Garry, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, guys. Hello to everyone. And just a little bit about myself. So I was very lucky enough to have an 18-year professional playing career. I started at 16 at the lowest professional level, which is League Two over here in the UK. And I managed to work my way all the way up to the Premier League. So I've played in every single professional league here in the UK, which is something that I'm very proud of. It's been quite a journey, lots of ups and downs, but I think the thing I'm most proud of is the longevity of it. To play 18 years professionally, and as you guys know, as coaches and you guys that have played the game, it's very difficult at those levels to have that longer longevity. Very proud of that. So 18 years professionally, and you can see there a few photos of the ups and downs. I've tried to put a few more successes on there than I have of the downs, but feel very blessed and very lucky to have had that career. And I think that career has also helped me because I've seen all of the levels, not just the stuff that we see on TV nowadays of the elite end, the very highest end. I think having to see the bottom and where we don't have the luxury of facilities and all the things that, the mod cons that a lot of the modern generation have, I think it's allowed me, moving into my coaching, to have an appreciation of certain things, which I've currently been doing now as a coach and a head coach for the last 9 years. Again, at the two top levels in terms of Premier League with Swansea City, and then the second level, which is the Championship here in the UK with, as you can see there, Middlesbrough, Birmingham, Sheffield Wednesday, and Leeds. And again, that's been a totally different experience. That's more what obviously I'm going to talk about tonight, in terms of what I've been through and the ups and downs of that, the surprise factors of it. But really what this presentation is about is when I first became head coach, it was literally a transition. I was playing. It's like you were playing, and then literally the next day, you're now head coach of a Premier League football club, which very rarely happens anymore, if not at all. And doing that with no experience whatsoever of coaching, to be thrown right in at the deep end, let's say, with no experience whatsoever. At that point, I had, during the latter stages of my playing career, already done my B license, UEFA B license, and A license. But I don't think any of that prepared me for being thrown straight into the deep end of a Premier League manager with no coaching experience really whatsoever. So it's quite a unique story, but also something that, again, that I'm, as a characteristic, it's something that I'm quite used to, putting myself out of my comfort zone. So what I did was, obviously being thrown straight into that, I didn't have time at all to think about what I did or how I was doing it. I was learning on the job. It was day by day. It was relentless. And it's only been probably 2 years after I started my coaching, head coach career at the Premier League and then on to Leeds United. It was literally the period just after leaving Leeds United where I had a chance to sit down and put this together. And this is kind of, for me, a sort of blueprint of if I, what happened to me, what generally happens to players that are thinking about coaching, then start to move into coaching and then want to become managers or head coaches. It was kind of putting down into words and into a presentation form of how I could put a blueprint there of what I need to think about, or how I can share that experience with other coaches, other aspiring head coaches, players that are transitioning out into coaching, into management. A blueprint there that of what they should really be thinking about. So it's not to say that you have to do this, but I think there's a lot in there where it kind of, as a blueprint, things that you probably wouldn't have thought about, which I didn't think about when I first became a manager, head coach, that I wish I knew. And really, these are my kind of thoughts on what I do now when I go into football clubs, and if I start a new job or a new role as a head coach. These are the things that I make sure that I put in order, and I make sure that I clarify with when I go into that new role. So yeah, hopefully you like it. In terms of this presentation, normally I go into, so I deliver this on UEFA A licenses and pro licenses, and normally it's obviously in front of the group and it's interactive, a lot of questions back and forth, a little bit more different online. So I know I spoke to the guys, and they'll stop me if there's any questions after any sections. If not, save up your ammunition and then you can fire at me and critique at the end. So yeah, but hopefully there'll be a bit of interaction between it. If not, it'll be at the end. But yeah, please, like they said, put your questions in the chat box, and I'll answer them, happily to answer them. Okay. Yeah. So the contents, it's kind of in chronological order that I kind of thought about this, and obviously you can see from there those topics. These are the topics that I'm going to go through. As I said, there is videos in there, especially when we move into the planning part of training and your game models and stuff like that. Hopefully they play all right on here, but you know, it can be difficult with the internet connections and stuff. So if they are stuttering or it's not quite playing or coming across how it should be, I'm happy to, like I said to the guys, I'll send these videos across, and the guys are more than happy to share it with you. So yeah, let's get going. So obviously the first one, very simple, but I think it's a very important one in terms of readiness. Like I said, I was in a really unique position where I was playing. And so was I ready? No. But had I really thought about it, are you ever really ready? Probably not. But it depends on the opportunity. But I think that's the key one to ask yourself, the important questions to ask yourself whenever you go into a new job. It doesn't have to be a head coach job. It can be any coaching job in any type of role. I think you have to really look at the opportunity. Is it a real opportunity? What's your reason for going in there? Is it because you just want to get a foot on the ladder, or is it a case of just putting one foot on the ground and just wanting to work? It doesn't matter where I work. That's fine, and obviously that's a lot of situations where that happens. But I think opportunity is a real thing where you have to really look at it deeply, because I think everything that we are as coaches, I think all of us have aspiration. I think we all want to try and make those next steps to become better coaches and have better opportunities going forward, whether that's with the organization you're with or to another organization. But the opportunity has to be one way, if you're going to put the work there, like I say there, the 100% commitment, it has to be one where if you commit 100%, then if it's successful, the opportunity to be successful is there. Whereas I think a lot just take jobs for the sake of taking jobs, which is fine. That's their prerogative. I kind of look at it a little bit different, because the effects on the family, especially at the levels that I've coached at, have been huge. I have 3 young children, not so young anymore. I have twin boys that are 9 years old and a daughter that's 12. When I started, my twin boys weren't even born, or they were 2 weeks away from being born. My daughter was obviously a lot much younger. When you're 100% committed, you're fully focused on it. Even your home life, you're focused on it. You can't get away from it. And all the effects that come with it around on your family, it's huge pressure. But I also think even at whatever level you coach at, if you're 100% committed to it, the effects on your family can be huge, more than you probably aware that yourself. So it's an obvious question, are you ready? But I think those 3 things there are very relevant. I didn't think about these well enough. I just threw myself in there, and lucky enough it went well, but it could have easily have gone wrong and had ramifications, probably far greater than what I was aware of at that time. So if I had the opportunity again, yes, I probably would have taken it, but I would have been a bit more thoughtful, especially towards the family. So that's that. And then this, I think we always have these conversations, what type of manager or coach are you? I think it's really important to have a real good understanding of what type of coach you are. because that will also dictate back to what opportunities you take, and organizations you go into, players that you work with or you're aiming to work with. So over here in the UK, the kind of external perception of myself, I'm 44 years old. When I started, I was 34. So during that period, I'm now probably just over what it says there, a young up-and-coming British manager. I'm probably just moving into the middle section of my coaching career, where I have quite a bit of experience behind me now, but the perception is still there enough where it's a young up-and-coming British manager. Internal perception. So what my internal perception of myself, I'm very lucky I feel lucky where I've grew up in two eras. I've grew up in the era of the old school where senior pros, work ethic, things that you can't do now with younger generations because it's frowned upon. But I experienced all of that as my kind of schooling. And then obviously the more modern generation as well, which I've experienced, the sports science that comes into it, the technology, the analysis, the more modern methods that you use for things like pre-season, rather than just the old school running and stuff like that. So I'm quite aware that I have old school values, but I try and do it in a real modern approach. So I try and marry the both up. That's my perception of myself and what I try and focus on. And these are just some of the things that I really focus on. My organizational skills. I like to be super organized as a person, but also within my coaching ability, and how that comes across to my staff or across to players and anyone in that organization is having organizational skills. I think we've all coached in chaos. It's great to be in that chaos in certain moments, because we grow in it. But if you're constantly in it, I don't think anyone benefits in the long term, especially yourself. But your players and your staff and the organization won't benefit in that chaos. Knowledge and learning, constant. I know we're even doing it tonight. Hopefully I learned something as well, which I'm sure I will with your questions. Knowledge and learning all the time, constant. Adapting to the team or the team adapt to you. So this is a good question. Often I throw this out to the group, but to answer it myself, I think we're all romantics at heart. I think we all have a perfect view of how we would like our teams to play. But depending on what levels you're coaching at, I can only speak for the levels that I've coached at, where I've been in situations where the club don't care about that romantic view. I don't have the squad or the necessary players to play that romantic view that I have. So a lot of the jobs that I've taken where I've had to adapt myself to the squad rather than the squad adapt to my philosophy or my romantic view of how I want to play. And I think the idea behind that is owners that I've worked with want results here and now. And that's pretty much modern day professional football, is to put that in place, try and get results consistently enough whilst you're adapting to them, to, if you get the opportunity to move forward and have a bit more longevity of those clubs, is to then slowly progress it to that romantic view or your own philosophy from there. I've got part of the way there with some of the clubs that I've been at, but not the full way. So I've often had to adapt to the squad that I had. My coaching style, I think nowadays you have to be a mixture of all of it. I think certain moments dictate certain things where you need to be, like it says there, autocratic, democratic, guide and discovery, many other styles as well. I think you have to be an all-rounder now. I think one way doesn't work. It works in certain situations, but longevity-wise, if you the same type of coach in terms of your style and how you present and how you come across, I think it doesn't last. There's no longevity in that. I think you have to be adaptable and use all the coaching styles. I think that the modern generation, even more so than ever. I'm very balanced emotionally. I think that the pressure that I've been under has kind of like dictated that more than not. I think as a player, I was much more emotionally higher. As a coach, I think you realize just it's more about relief, the natural feeling of the winning. It's more relief that the work that you've done come to fruition on that particular weekend or that particular match. Probably about 10, 20 minutes of elation and then it's into relief and then bang straight on to the next thing. So you don't get a lot. So staying emotionally balanced, whether you win or you lose, is something that you really have to concentrate on. And then people skills and approachability. I think, again, the modern generation, especially, you have to have them. You have to be open. You have to be approachable. Yes, there's a line that you have to draw, but I think being approachable, being a good person, being strong in your decisions, but being a good person, approachable, allowing questions, allowing people to question certain things that you're doing. I think you have to have that open-mindedness to accept that. And then this one I often ask the group is, it sounds silly, but it's quite an important one, tracksuit or suit, coach. I think I got asked that when I first took over at Swansea. So I was captain and I was a player. I took over with 13 games to go, and we were fighting relegation in the Premier League. It was a decision I had to make. Do I go straight in? Let's be a player with these guys, and literally the day before, had a lot of social interactions with those players. A lot of them were mates. Had to decide: do I turn up in a suit, or do I turn up in a tracksuit and be one of the guys? So I think I chose to be tracksuit for those 13 games. I wanted them to feel, I didn't want to act like a manager. I wanted to be the captain. Yes, I had to put on trainings, and yes, I had to make team selections, but I wanted them to feel that I was still part of them, and I was one of them, and we're all in this together to try and get us safe from relegation. So those 13 games went really well. And then in the summer, I had to decide, obviously when I was permanently made manager, I quite fancy putting a suit on. So I've mixed between the two, but it's more a question that I normally throw out into the group from there. So going back to the original point, what type of coach, imagine being really aware of who you are. I like to write it down like this. So those are the things I focus on, and being really aware of myself and what type of coach that I want to be, and what I am, and then what I want to be, where I can make improvements, where's strong, where's my weaknesses. And then it's obviously moving into when you get the opportunity. So where you get an opportunity in organization, I think the first thing that you should always try and do before you even meet with generally we all go to interviews or we speak to people that we know there in terms of who can offer us, who's offering you the role or the job. I think before you even speak to them, yes, you're aware of it, that you're going to have an opportunity to speak to these guys. Knowing everything about that organization, I think stands you in really good stead. I think when you turn up and you wing it, and yes, you've got a little bit of idea of that club and a little bit of what they've done in the past and a little bit of what's going on now. I think if you've got someone who's really good at their job and they question you properly, I think you can become very unstuck with that. And I think also what impresses organizations is you having a really good understanding of where they're at and where their history is, and as much about that club, even not just the here and now, but going back in the past as well. So the history of the club, I think, is really important, or the organization, knowing everything you can about it. And sometimes you might only have a short window to try and get this information, because soccer moves fast. You might have a couple of days to prepare because an interview's just come up, or you might have a week or 2 weeks, you might have longer. But I think whichever period you have, as much as you can get in terms of the history of the club, I think it's important. I think understanding the supporters, if your club's got supporters, this can be parents as well, in terms of grassroots and stuff like that, is understanding their expectation. I think often we get a little bit frustrated with fans and parents constantly questioning us, and we kind of try and keep them at arm's length at certain times. I think just trying to understand them and their expectations is crucial. I think analysing the squad that you're going into, I think is hugely important. Knowing what you're going into. If you can do this before you even go in, obviously, for the job, this is all pre-interview. Again, gives you great knowledge, and obviously impresses in terms of your knowledge about what their organisation is all about. Understanding how they may have trained or played previously. So if there is footage, or there is people that you can speak to that maybe have trained those players or coached those players, or you can get hands-on footage of the games from before. Again, that gives you great power, great knowledge when you're going in there. What staff or are currently at the organisation or the club. it may be something you have to, often I've had to go in and work with coaches that are already there, understanding previously of what's there and what's maybe higher up or lower beneath you, and what's around you, I think is crucial. And then obviously, I know some guys will work in the youth, but I think the way I'd put this is understanding what's below you, what's coming through, whichever level. So if I'm an under a 12s coach, understanding what's coming beneath you, even though they might not be directly linked to you, I think is really, really important. I know coaches can sometimes move up with the age groups, but at the professional levels with the youth teams, the youth academies, the organizations underneath, knowing what's there, if I can get an idea of that before, or understanding that organization, this puts you in the driving seat, basically, is what I'm saying. This impresses, this gives them a real wow factor in terms of this guy knows what they're talking about before you even, as soon as you go into that interview process. I think if you're winging it, like I said, I think that if they're clever and they ask you the right questions, you'll be found out. So this is what I do previous to any job that I'm aware that I'm going to go for an interview with. This is what I do. As you can see, it's very in order. I make sure I go for every single, if I've got 2 days to prepare, I do as much as I can. If I've got a week or 2 weeks longer, great, perfect. I get more information, but this is what I'm armed with before I even step into that interview with owners. And then dealing with the owners, brilliant topic. I love it. I've worked with all types of owners from all backgrounds, nationalities, and it's been quite an experience. But again, what I try and format is what I've got a plan when I go in to meet them. So I've done my homework, which I've just previously on the previous one I said, first impressions are critical. What's really important is how you communicate what you're going to do. So go back to that, what I said before. I've got a good idea of where the squad's at. I've got a good idea of where the whole club is, the history of the club, what they've done previously, what players are already there, staff are there, what youth setup is there, what's coming beneath. I have a good idea. I then formulate that into my vision, what I think I can do with that setup, and then what I can do immediately. Because often when you get roles at this level, often it's clubs that are in trouble. Often jobs are lost because results haven't been good, and then obviously you're 9 times out of 10. Very rarely will you go into a club that's already being successful. Only ones that are very smart and succession plan, but majority of clubs is because they're in a poor vein of form. So knowing what you're going to do immediately, and then giving them, communicating that with all that information that you've gathered, and then obviously what you're going to do in the future as well. I think that stands you in really good stead. And this is always a good one as well. I think have the presentation ready, have it in a visual form like we're doing tonight, have it visually, whether that's PowerPoint or some sort of presentation, and have a paper copy. Always put the presentation, whichever job you're going for, put it into a paper copy. So when you walk in straight to that interview, you put the paper copy straight in front of them, and also you're leaving it there for afterwards as well. This way they might have, it's very well known within an interview process where they're probably listen to around 30% of the information that you're going to give them in that whole process. Whereas a paper copy is there for them to have afterwards when they want to try and, when they're clearly going to have discussions about you, they clearly going to try and maybe have missed a couple of things. I think that's a really good, powerful tool to put in front of them and have for them to have where they can remind themselves. And it's more keeping it bullet point, keeping it short, but the information that you've done or you've gathered to present to them is clear for them as well. So I've always done that. And I think that's actually what is impressed. 2 jobs I got, A, because they thought I was good enough to get the jobs, but 2 of them was because, and both the owners mentioned, was because they had the paper copy of my presentation, because they were able to refer back to what I was saying within that meeting. So that's just shows you how powerful it can be. Second one then is once you've communicated your vision and what you're going to do in the immediate and the future, I think it's then really confirming what the owner's expectations or the head coach or the TD, whoever that may be that you're speaking to, is confirming their expectations. You want to get that really clear. sometimes it can be really grey going in there, and no matter what level you're at, it's really important to distinguish what their expectations are and to make it very clear. I think that protects you going forward. We know football can be changed, and it's always a moving object, but I think confirming their expectations gives you something to work towards, and also holds them a little bit accountable to it. I know they're in positions of we've seen terrible decisions, and their accountability isn't always the greatest, the people that are in those positions, but some do hold that accountability well. They've explained it to you, they remember what they've said to you, and then you have something to really focus on in terms of their expectations. And then what are they going to do to help you achieve those expectations? So they can have expectations, that's fine. It could be the highest expectations in the world, but whatever expectations they're at, I think it's important as well to communicate, okay, I'm going to try and bring this. Okay, these are your expectations. This is what I think I can do to help you reach those expectations, but what are you going to do? So you're kind of trying to give them a bit of realism of, it's fine to say, yeah, we want to win the league. Okay, but you might know as a coach, you've got the worst squad in the league or one of the weakest squads. So that's unattainable. But a lot of owners or people in those sort of positions don't really think like that. They don't really understand that. They just have expectations this high. So I think trying to put a bit of realistic twist on them without dampening their expectations is being really clear with what are you going to do to help me with that? Whether that's budgets, it's players, it's staff that I can bring in, where's the sports science, the nutrition, the travel, the training, the stadium facilities, I might need help with that. It's trying to get them that accountability back onto them as well as you. And then what's important, if everything's agreed and it's an opportunity you're going to take, they want to bring you. I think it's really important, if you're able to bring staff with you, you secure them first before you secure yourself. I've made the mistake in one of my jobs where I took the job without agreeing my staff, and then once I was in, and then with the understanding, thinking, okay, some of my staff or a couple of my coaches are going to come with me, is the club didn't allow me. The club then wanted me to promote from within, which is fine. I would have been fine if they had explained that from the start. I could have made a decision whether to take that opportunity or not. But it caught me, I was expecting my staff, a couple of my staff to come with me. I signed my contract first, and then they had me. Do you know what I mean? So securing or agreeing if you are bringing staff with you, agreeing that first before then you agree yourself. I think that's just a detail that I learned the hard way. So I always put that in there just to check with myself. And then I think overall it's taking all of that into account when you have those discussions, whichever role you're going into, whoever you're speaking to that's recruiting you. I think it's taking all of that into account, and then, okay, again, formulate it in your brain. Is that the right opportunity for yourself? Quite simple stuff, but I think it's good to have something that you can go back through, checkpoints, and make sure that you're ticking them off in these processes. And then this bit, okay, this links a little bit towards when you're agreeing to go in, but it also can happen as it evolves throughout your journey at that organization, especially in the head coach role. Removing anyone who can't help you succeed. It's a very harsh one, but it's a really vital, important one. You look at the top coaches in the world, they're very, very strong on this. Anyone that can't help them, they remove, or they move to the side. They only want people that can help them succeed. So often in the professional setups that I've had, and there'll be organizations even down to grassroots, it might not be as complex as this, but you'll be familiar with roles in certain positions linked to certain coaches or head coaches or whatever that may be. As I said before, I have a good idea of what's already in place before I go in. But understanding in all these departments here I am here, if I'm the head coach or the manager of this organization, what I have around me, obviously these are ones that you can't remove in terms of owners and technical directors, people that are above you in terms of the decision making. But definitely below you in the areas that are really important to your training, your staff especially, is identifying people that are going to really help. I think, unfortunately, in the world that we live in and in life, it's anyway, is there will be people within your organization that can't help you succeed, that will do things that are detrimental to what you're doing. I think it's really important that you suss those people out very quickly, that you're trying to identify those people very quickly. I often, when I go in with the staff, I speak to all staff. I go and work with all staff. That's all the way down to even if I'm working with the senior teams, I'll go into the academies with the youth coaches. I'll work with them, and as much as I'm working with them to try and help them, I'm also trying to gauge where I think they're at. Are they on our side? Are they going to try and help us? Are they useful, or are they not? And I have to make really quick decisions to try and get that right, get my staff in right. And that doesn't matter whether that's coaches I brought with me. Obviously, they're right because I'm bringing them with me, or people that are already there. So it's a tough one, but it's a vitally important one. And then, okay, moving on to the assessing the current squad. And just this is really more how I do it, sort of a guide on sort of how I assess my squads. Links to a little bit of obviously recruitment as well. So in terms of squad management, again, I'll go through this process before and during whilst I'm there in terms of the squad that I have. So I kind of categorize my squads when I'm analyzing them. Like I said, before I even go into the organization, and whilst I'm a constant process whilst I'm throughout. And again, keeping it very simple. I have my first team players. I try and identify, okay, if I had to pick a game tomorrow, if I had a match tomorrow, so I do this before I go in. If I had a match tomorrow, which starting 11 would I pick from what I've analyzed? And then I do that on a constant basis every week. If I had to pick a game tomorrow, even though there's not a game tomorrow, which 11 would I do? And I do that with my staff as well. So I constantly trying to categorize them into, okay, what would be, if my life depending on it tomorrow and I had to pick a team, which is the 11 that I would choose? That gives me a good understanding of where I think they're at. Obviously, then there's the depth of the squad, as you see in the red. So these are the guys that can be starting 11 and often are in there, or they're just on the outside of that starting 11. And categorizing them and understanding how many I've got in that type of group, what's the composition of that group, and then the shadow group, which is often the youth players. Like I said there, I've got a policy at the bottom. Every professional club I've gone into, I take the 8 youth team players straight away, and I put them straight into my trainings. And then I obviously decide whether they're good enough to stay in that first team environment or not, or whether ones over a period of time have improved more that deserve to come in. But there's youth players training with my senior players every single day. And obviously breaking into the first teams, that's the idea. Giving young players an opportunity, because the reason why I believe in that so much is, number one, if you've got a professional academy youth set up at your club, then why aren't you using it? I don't believe, if it hasn't got one, okay, fine. But if they've got professional academies, why are you not using youth players? And then second part is, that was my journey. I was a youth player, 14, 15, 16, coming through a professional club, and I could see the pathway. I think it's important to give these young players a clear pathway, and that doesn't matter whatever organization you're in, whether that's professional or grassroots, it doesn't matter. Them being able to see a pathway to the older age groups, or to the more elite competitive side of things, having a clear pathway is hugely important. So I categorize my squads, and that's a constant moving object. And I do that every week because it's constant. And then obviously try and formulate, it gives me a bit of a better idea of formulating who's in form, who should be where, what's happening. And that's, as I said, whether that's coming from below as a youth player up into the shadow squads, up into the first team, or vice versa, from the first team, starting 11s, and maybe they're filtering out for whatever reasons. Oh, let me see. There we go. And then recruitment. So at the professional levels, there's a lot goes down to the coaching, I think, but a lot of it comes down to you are as good as your players. So the recruitment is one of the most, if not the most important part of your job, or dictates success or not. So recruiting, and these are just like examples of, you know, offensively and defensively KPIs that I look at. I'll talk a little bit more on the next slides of how I actually process that. But there's a couple of examples below where Gylfi Sigurdsson, I'd signed from Tottenham, high profile player, Icelandic international. We signed him for 10 million at the time from Tottenham, from Spurs, which was a huge sum really for a club the size of Swansea. But within a couple of years, he was sold for 40 million, 45 million to Everton Football Club. So there was a 450% profit on him. And then other examples where Pablo Hernandez, who I played with at Swansea, when I went to Leeds United, I used my personal relationships to recruit, you know, players, fantastic players like Pablo, and he obviously helped them to go on to make it to the Premier League, a catalyst in that. And then also type of recruitment that I've done where in the Championship, especially in the second league in England, is this player Britta Sombalonga was one, just as an example, where a lot of Premier League football clubs were looking at him at that time, offering him contracts. I managed to secure his signature over Premier League, which was quite an achievement, which I was really proud of at the time, through being personable, being approachable, and obviously selling in the vision that I had with Middlesbrough at the time. So recruitment's, we all know how important it is, but this is just like a sort of an overview. But the actual process I go through when I'm recruiting, and I do a little bit of this, especially the first two phases with my current squads, and I do this when I'm going in or I'm assessing a squad that maybe it's an opportunity that I'm going to go into. But the first phase that I do, I always analyze, and this is me personally, as well as having analysts and stuff like that as well, is I analyze 10 games minimum of players. And what I do with those 10 games is their most competitive games, the most recent 10 most recent competitive games. And what I mean by that is I don't watch a game where a player, let's take Swansea, for instance. I won't take a Swansea, generally middle to bottom half of the Premier League table. So I wouldn't watch a player, for example, if they were playing against the top 6 of that league. Because generally players emotionally or actively will play harder against higher ranked clubs because they want to prove a point. And then I do exactly the same, where I won't watch them play against teams that are ranked in the bottom 5 or 6 of that particular league, because sometimes they're in a comfort zone, or they're going through the motions, or they're not playing to their full potential because it's just a team that we know we're going to beat. So I always watch players, or get their most competitive games where they're playing against teams that are equal or of equal ability to where they are. I think that gives you a better gauge, or I feel personally it gives you a better gauge of actually the true reflection of that player. So I analyze 10 minimum games. It depends, you know, when it's happening. If it's through in the season when you're so busy. In the off season, you get to watch more games because you have more time. But 10 games minimum. Obviously, recruitment departments and stuff have more information, but I watch 10 games minimum. I then break those 10 games down into KPIs as well that I want to see from that player. Then phase 2 is I'll go to live scouting if possible, and gather a lot of as much information as possible. Obviously, professional levels, you have recruitment departments that can do that. But if I know any personal relationships that have worked with that player, I'll go and do that and gather that information myself, where often it's more real in terms of the information that you're getting. And then phase 3 is, once we've gone through that process, is you put them into 3 categories. It's either sign, yes, definite, 100%. Monitor, okay, I like them, but I need to see more, or I need to see maybe watch them a little bit longer because I'm not so sure. And then no. It's those 3 categories from there in my own mind. And then phase 4, if it's a sign, I'll go and meet that player and their representatives. But one thing I always do is I meet the family, because I think the family, especially the mum and especially the dad, if they have them, the blood family will tell you a lot about that player without saying much. I think it's hugely important, even at the professional levels. Often the mum and the dad are a reflection of their son or their daughter, I think, or they tell you a lot about the environment that they're coming from. And I think, and this works all the way from grassroots all the way up to professional. I think it tells you a lot about that player. And I think that's a huge important thing that I always make sure of. And I'm sure you guys do as well. And then obviously from a professional point of view, if we're buying players, is that's more a club decision. Is it financially viable? So that's the sort of process that, especially the first three are what I go through personally, and the first one of phase 4, and then financially viable will be dictated to by the club. I hope that's helpful for you guys. And they're the type of KPIs that I look at. So I'll have these broken down from those 10 games or more, whichever I've watched. I'll have them, all 1v1s offensively from those 10 games or more, as an example. And that gives me I feel, really good understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of this player. Can I coach this weakness to be better? Can I coach this strength to be a super strength? Have they already got a super strength? I think this gives me a really good idea. Whilst I'm doing my job, whilst I'm busy, I think hugely important. And these won't be any different. Some might be slightly different, but you guys would have all seen, or pay importance to these type of KPIs from an individual tactical perspective. So this is just an example to show you. And then on to it. So we've gone through all that process. Okay, I bet you're thinking, Jesus Christ, can we not just go in and just do some coaching, please, mate? So yeah, but it's important. That's the whole process to get to the point of, okay, now I've got to think about what I'm actually going to do, what plan I'm going to put in place, related to the squad in terms of the game models and the trainings. So this is what this part's about, and hopefully the videos will help reflect that. So deciding, okay, we've gone through all that process. Here's my squad. Whether I'm adapting to them or they're going to adapt to my game model, you can call it playing style, whatever you want to do. I'm calling it game model for this example. Deciding what that's going to be, crucial. Whether that's with staff or whether that's yourself, working on your own, doesn't matter what level, but understanding my game model and what that's going to be suited to my players is crucial. How am I going to train it then? So here's my game model. How am I going to train it? What goes into that? My morphology and periodization, so especially from the physical point of view and scheduling point of view, how is that going to be trained? And again, you can do this all the way from grassroots all the way up to professional, whether it's 1 day a week or full time, it doesn't really matter, but this is the process I go through. And then the environment that they're going to work in. Okay, so game models, the trainings that I'm going to do, the periodization morphology that I'm going to follow, and make sure that that connects together, and then the environment that I'm going to try and create and the culture that I'm going to try and create. So part of formulating those decisions on those things there, from a professional point of view, I often, I want to, first of all, before I make decisions on what I just shown you, I want to know is understanding the competition that I'm in. So this is an example of the Championship, second league in the UK. I'll do a study on the final third from the previous season. I'll see how teams approach the final third. So from a defensive point of view, how are teams attacking the final third as an average? And you can see quite clearly here in the Championship, it's very crossing and 1v1 heavy by far, and 2v1s and beat by moves and 2v2s and other situations like throw-ins and stuff like that are you can see where they're at in terms of percentages. So that tells me straight away from a defensive point of view is I have to organize a game model in a competition that I'm going to play in the Championship that has to be very good at dealing with or stopping crosses and very good at dealing with 1v1 and defending 1v1 situations. So that's really good information for me from a defensive point of view as a coach on what type of game model that I'm now going to try and put in place with the players that I have. And obviously they're linked in terms of the formations that we're going to play them. It's not all about defensive, attacking as well, but from a defensive point of view, if I'm setting up a game model that can deal well with crosses and 1v1s, stopping them, whether that's a back 4 or back 5, I have to, it gives me good information to decide on that. And then from an attacking point of view, doing the same research in terms of defensively, what teams are strong at, I'll do that as well, which I haven't got here tonight. But then that'll formulate, I kind of work from the back forwards. I deal with the defensive side first, formulate that game model from the defensive side, because that's the competition that I'm going into. That's what's going to, clean sheets will give me the best opportunity of winning games because we'll always be in the game. But then offensively, because I'm an offensive coach predominantly, is, okay, that's what we're going to do defensively. What do I need to do offensively? So formations and the same type of study offensively for that. And then when I've decided all of those things, what my game model is going to be because of the information that I've gathered, is I like to put, and I think this is really important, is, and again, it doesn't matter what level you're at. I think often as coaches, we make the mistake of verbalizing our vision. So we'll talk a lot about what we want us to be and our playing style, and this is what we do, and this is what we stand for. But I think, especially nowadays, visualization for players is huge. I think it's the constant message, the verbalization from you as a coach of our playing style and what we're going to do. But I think the visual needs to be there as well. So I always put a vision visually for them, as well as my talking, as well as this message that's constantly going out at my time there and through my coaches, the constant message of our vision in terms of verbally, the visual is there all the time as well. So this gets verbalized and visualized on the very first day that I meet that squad. And it's a constant there visually as well as verbally. It's on their lockers, it's in their kit bags, it's on their phones, it's on their iPads, wherever that may be. That vision of our game model, and this is just an example from Birmingham City when I was there, this was the vision and the game model, basically telling them this is what we're going to stand for, this is our identity. So I think getting those both verbally and visually is really important and hugely advantageous in terms of it's a constant message that's there, not just verbally. So this is an example of a game model. And then understand that game model, it's been communicated visually and verbally. So this is just an example. This one here, we're using zonal marking systems. So I've decided that defensively, we're instant pressing, we're balanced behind when we're transitioning out. We're working on build-up options against press and blocks that are coming against us. We're aggressive with our passing. The objective is to arrive in the final third using the space or creating numerical overload. So that's the game model. And then the transition in is the importance of securing first passes. When we win the ball back, we don't just give it straight away. We try and attack space. Great. If not, we secure first passes. So that's an example of a game model, being really clear with it. So when I've been clear on my game model, and then going into the training part of it is formulate that into the training defensively and offensively from here. And hopefully these videos, well, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. So from that game model there, okay, as an example, is formulated into the trainings, broken up. Okay, and you can see from here, we're going to take the defensive first. We're going to take the number one first, which is our shape, defensive shape, our regaining yards when we're in defensive shape, and our box defense. So we're working on positions and triggers and speed and aggressive and the roles and responsibilities of the players. And here's some examples. Please let me know if it's not playing so well. Just a couple of examples for you where I've trained that. This isn't all the training that we do to get to this situation, but it's just examples of how we build that up and then how it shows in the games from here. So the first idea is them to have spatial awareness. And we do these in 5-minute drills. These are done as warm-ups or part of warm-ups or warm downs. Obviously opposed sessions as well. Them creating those ideas of distances and distances of units, especially the ones without the balls, when it's movement drills. Sorry, I can see it's skipping already. When it's movement drills, it's to give them spatial awareness, distances between the squads. Obviously, then you're doing opposed drills, unit drills, to break down that defensive shape for them and make it clear. And then obviously how it relates into the game. So this was Swansea against Manchester United. I think it was my very first game when I became permanent manager. Louis van Gaal's first game. But it's a good one. Us in white, it shows the distances, so relating the trainings to, and obviously then you show this to the players afterwards, relating the distances, the shape that we're working in. Have I done that through pre-season well enough? We ended up winning this game 2-1. But these are good examples of that shape. This is Leeds United when we played Liverpool. Again, whichever shape we were using, in terms of the distances that we have, the roles and responsibility, the positions, the triggers, how we are from a defensive point of view. Sorry, I can see it's jumping. Hopefully there's enough there for you to see in terms of it running smoother. But good positions, good distances, good roles and responsibilities, good understanding. Middlesbrough, another example. Understanding our distances, understanding our roles. Yep, sorry, I can see it's jumping. But really just to give you that idea how that correlates from training into the trainings. And then box defense. So this is a concept for me where we're all probably do it, especially at the older ages. We'll give them a shape to work from, and roles, and generally that will happen in the middle of the pitch, or if we're pressing high, we'll do it up the higher of the pitch. But what we often do when we're defending the box is we just defend the box. We defend the box with our life. Whereas I like to give clear roles and responsibilities when we're defending our box. So these are just some examples of how I've done it before. Because I think it's exactly the same as when we're in the middle of the pitch or higher up the pitch. I think having roles and responsibilities from a defensive point of view for the players is hugely important. So here, same idea. I'm working on fullbacks and wingers working together, midfield covers, okay? 2 centre halves, opposite fullbacks working in central of the box, opposite wingers, midfielder, and obviously whether that's 2 strikers or a 10 and a striker working in the upper there. But it's putting rules and responsibilities on them. This one you can't see as well, but fullback working, midfield's going to covers, my 3, 2 centre halves opposite fullback, my opposite midfielder. So again, doing it broken down, overloaded, whatever it may be, underloaded, and obviously the technical trainings that go with it. Just some examples of defending our box, the roles. That's my 2 centre halves working. That's their roles, and they know when we're defending our box, they have to be in the middle of the goal between the posts. They don't go out and cover fullbacks. My midfielders do that. And again, how it relates into the games. Fullbacks are opposing the wides. Here's my midfield cover. The winger works. My 2 centre halves, opposite fullback in place centrally, opposite winger, midfielder, my 10 and my striker. Midfielder still in the cover position. So my centre backs aren't coming from here and out to cover. They're staying centralised. Again, it's a role, it's a responsibility. Same here. See when the ball's switched. My winger's working, my fullbacks are working the wide. My midfielder is going to the cover position. My other 3 defenders are central. Opposite winger, midfielder, my 2 strikers left up the pitch ready to counter-attack. Again, it's roles, responsibilities. Sorry if it's jumping a little bit. Same principle note. Fullback and wingers wide, midfield's cover. My 3 other defenders centralised. Opposite midfielder central, edge of the box. Opposite winger, 2 strikers left. And then just the defensive technicals, just some examples. Again, I'll send these videos to you guys. You can have them. But as you know from the information about before, a massive emphasis, I think anyway, I think even at the professional levels, we do this from 6, 7 years old, don't we? Technicals, training is hugely important. Big part of what I'm doing now with my company Soccer Profile, but technical training, but 1v1 defensive technicals, even at the professional level, are constantly trained, constantly put there in terms of the importance, how they're related to the games. These show you how related they are. Again, 1v1 situations defensively. Hopefully the videos are playing fine for you guys. Please let me know if they're too static. I can always skip. Again, defending 1v1 situations, how they relate to the game. Even at the highest levels, how they're still constantly working on them. Same, stopping crosses, technically. Again, everything's related to the game. I put them in positions or geography on the pitch where they're going to face these in games, face these situations. And then when you show them the game, which is in the clips now, in exactly those areas of the pitch, exactly those situations, that's where the buy-in and the kind of confirmation that players need to the work that you're doing. So if you can show it geographically, or when you're training your technicals, wherever they may be, these are defensive examples. If you can do them in the areas of the pitch that are actually going to face. I know sometimes space is limited. Sometimes you're not working on full pitches, half pitches, stuff like that. But if you get the opportunity to put them in the areas that they're actually going to face these situations the most, again, visually as well as verbally, it's sinking into their minds. Stopping shots, stopping crosses, geographies where they face them mostly on the pitch. Again, then how do I relate that to the game? There we go. The geography, I did it in the training, exactly the geography that you did it in a game. Same again here. Where did we do it in the trainings? If you see it was on the edge of the box or around the edge of the boxes. Exactly what they see in the games. Same here, around the edge of the boxes. 2v1s, wall passes. So many players make this mistake where they approach the ball. Okay, and then when the pass goes back to the other player, they follow the ball or turn their back on the player that they've just approached, and then they're beaten. So we do a lot of training on this, even at professionals. You watch the next games, how many players get 1-2s, get wall passes played around them because they followed the ball. So we're constantly training that. And again, showing them, if you watch player here, see how he stays with the player? He doesn't just follow the ball, able to retreat to the ball and win the ball back. Same here. Ball's played, he stays with the player, he doesn't follow the ball so much. The key is to track the player that you approached. See, he could easily got attracted to the ball, left his player. See how he stays with the player. Especially from a defensive point of view, huge. And these are all things that you guys will train. They're all simple stuff, but again, how important they are all the way through your career, whatever level you're at. But again, we work on them constantly. It's part of their individual programs. It's part of the trainings. It's a constant there. And then again, relating it to the games where they face it, interceptions, how many times they face them in games, interceptions. We just look at interceptions generally when we watch games and think, oh, that's a good interception. Oh, good positioning. No, these things have to be worked. I think there's a technique in it, but it's also tactical, but it's also an intuition, but you have to train that. Covers and covers, so when you're beaten, it's not just, oh, that's it, my job's done. No, I have to cover the next player. So if I'm ever beaten, I have to recover and cover other players. These are just some examples of training. How I approach the ball. If I'm beaten, I cover and recover. Same situations here, getting attacked. If I'm beaten, I don't just stop, I cover. Sorry, I recover and then I cover. Same again, I recover and now I cover. And this is a constant process. So you see here, recovering after being beaten. Same thing, ball's been beaten by this, the ball's beating this guy, covers come, recovering. Again, all stuff that we take for granted, but so important to keep training at every level. So he's beaten, he's been covered, he now needs to recover, to cover again. Again, this is what I guess at professional levels, we expect this, but you'll be amazed at how they don't unless you train it from a consistent basis. So that's a defensive point of view. From an offensive point of view, again, going back to the game model that you decided, just an example. So counter-attacking, if that's what we've decided in our game model, first pass is forward, the speed, the sets that we do with our counter-attacks, the supports, and obviously the clinical finishing. So just examples, this is some of the trainings. So from a technical point of view, hopefully it plays all right for you guys to see. So a lot of overloads and underloads in terms of our trainings, the fastness of it, the pace of it. So we're getting both from the side, not only defending it, but really our concentration is on the offensive side of it, the types of runs, the movements that we want. So we do these, this is an example of a technical type of session. So it's the principle of it, but you allow that creativity and freedom and that movement and those counter reactions. Whether that's 3v2s, 2v1s, 2v2s, 3v3s, whatever we choose. And then the more tactical ones, where hopefully you can see this a little bit, but how they're more in their positions. This probably isn't playing as well, but obviously your defenders where they should be, the midfielders where they should be, whether you're playing with wingers or three attackers or two, doing it in a more position specific, realistic from a tactical point of view is important to be trained. I can see this is one to jump in. Scenario based training from the counter attacks. So doing it technically, doing it tactically. I'll skip hopefully, and then how it relates to the games. Hopefully these play a little bit better. So we're in the yellow here. This is examples from Birmingham because we were a counter-attacking team at that time. First pass is forward if we can. Speed, supports, attacking the box aggressively, clinical finishing. Same. So we're defending right now. Transition. Can we go with speed? Can we look forward, whether it's a pass or a drive forward? Supports, which is getting up with the attack quickly, clinical finishing. And this is an example where you maybe need sets. So what sets are, so we're defending, we win the ball, we can't drive or pass forward straight away. We need to be able to set. If we make that pass forward, it needs to be set like it is there, and then we play forward again. And then we're aggressive, we're fast. Okay, we've got supports, we've got men committed to it. Okay, that pass is overplayed, but we're still aggressive in the box, trying to get to a clinical finish. Unlucky there. So just examples of it from the training, technically, tactically, and how we, again, take it into the games, if that's our game model. And then just the offensive technicals. Again, 1v1, but flipped around. 1v1 situations, aggressive. These are just some examples of it. Hopefully the videos are playing well enough. But again, just showing you how it's constantly and doing it in areas where they're always going to be facing it, or geographically on the pitch where they're going to face those situations the most. So again, geographically receiving the ball, 1v1 situations, aggressive, skillful, sharp. Again, all technicals that all of us know as coaches, but again, really what I guess the point I'm trying to show you guys is even at the professional levels like that, how important they are to continue, how they're always involved in their individual development plans. Even when I've worked with 34, 35-year-old seasoned professionals who still have individual development plans, how important they are, how much they want that. I've had even old school players from, I was talking about the generations before, moving into the more modern way, having individual development plans. Really key. So you watch this one here game now. See there, see the player looks at the ball that was marking him when he passed the ball. And then complex walls, which means wall passes are involved with two players. Complex walls are involved with players up, 3 and above. So complex walls where one player plays it, 3 players can be involved, or 4 players. Still the same idea, wall passes. Here, 1, 2, and then 3, or you might call them third man runs. Showing it in the game, 1, second person, third person involved. The first one that passed it receives the final pass. First one that passed it uses the second player into the one that originally passed it. So again, how we train it, even in defensive situations, doesn't always have to lead to attack. But you see there are 3 players involved. The first one that passed it always receives the last pass. Again, simple stuff that all of us would have done as coaches, but really showing you even at these levels, how much is practice, how much is still related to the games, driving and shooting, the different angles that they have. And you watch these players that are doing it in trainings, you'll see some of their goals now in their games. Hopefully you can see. Same, drive and shoots. And then crossing and finishing positions. I like to, again, put rules on players. If I'm working with 2 strikers or 3 strikers, or if it's strikers and wingers, rules in terms of when we're facing crosses, in terms of movements that I want. So constantly training that in the final third, different types of movements, who's got to get to what positions within the box. So you see from here, these ones were working where opposite wingers were getting across. Strikers were going to the back. Midfielders were breaking into the box as well. So them anticipating those positions already. So again, it's rules, expectations, trained, related into games. Beat by move, you'll see in the clips, hopefully, is where we beat the opposite defenders back. So I might be marked by one, but often, so imagine I'm on one centre back as a striker, or a centre back's marking me. I try and attack the other centre half's back. See how he attacks the other back? Really important detail you'll see from here with the move, because the centre half, see how he starts on the first one, across to the second one, attacking his back, because the first one very rarely picks them up. This is just a stop and check example where they stop and check, but they're beating the opponent's back. I always say beat their number on their back. Same sort of principle where you're attacking the back of defenders with their runs. So yes, you have to play in front at certain moments, but can you beat, your objective, especially as attacking players, is to beat the back. And generally it'll be not the defender that's defending you, it's a defender that's not marking you that I want you to beat. And you'll see from the games here, so these are from deeper positions, same principle, starts on the first centre back. See the striker there, across, attacking the other defender's back, enough space, enough time, just those split seconds, gets himself a goal. And that's all from the training. See here, my striker here, hopefully you can see the cursor, starts on one centre back. Okay, see how he's attacking the back. Goal. Same here, starts on one. See how he attacks the back. This is my winger now, attacking the fullback's back. And hopefully those videos are played well enough for you to see. Okay, and then moving into my morphology and periodization. So there's the game model, there's the trainings or examples. I've sorted that out, how I'm doing it in the trainings, what I do from, especially from a physical point of view. But this bit here, just more related to those trainings where, you know, having it really clear in my mind. So the green is what's being trained, okay, and what the focuses are. You can see here, I often do 4-day build-ups into games. So if the match is here, I work a 4-day build-up, a constant 4-day build-up, and then after games is often when I give the recovery. I give the recovery. I don't tend to give recoveries in between, in the middle of the weeks. I give recoveries straight after games and the closest period after games. But the green's to show you what we're focused on. So green is focused around team principles, especially in the first 2 days, and then the 2 days leading up to the games is game plans and preparations. The yellow is individual development plans. Like I was talking to you there with the technicals, anything individually development, it can be small groups or small unit work as well as individual, is a constant theme all the way through. And then the blue is the analysis that we do, and when we deliver the analysis and who delivers it. You can see here that I'll deliver as a manager the post-match from the game before team analysis, and then obviously post-match analysis individually would be through my coaches, game plan analysis through myself, and obviously you can see from here. So it's having a real clear plan, okay, from my training, my game models and everything like that of what, and then also, sorry, I don't know if it's got it on there. Sorry, I've just come out of that. Let me play again. Hopefully you can see it. Yeah. What also I'll put in there is who leads these sessions. So as a head coach, for example, I can't lead every session. It's not good, healthy, not good for the players to lead every session. If I have an assistant coach, or if you're able to have some coaches around you, being them able to lead certain sessions, depending on how many times you train, is really important. To conserve your energy and your mind, but also to give players different voices, different approaches. It might be the same messages or the same principles that you're training, but a different voice often helps. And then this is just a little bit on GPS. I don't know how much you guys use GPS. It was more a point from myself as a coach. You know, I'm not a GPS expert. Yes, I've got a good understanding of GPS because I have studied it, but numbers and all these sort of things that go on and distances covered and all this sort of stuff. Yes, I have a thing in my mind when I'm when I'm coaching, and especially from matches, that certain distances that I want covered and intensities that I want. But from a coaching point of view, is what I want from my GPS to tell me as a coach is what I'm delivering on the pitch from a physical point of view, hitting the markers that I need to hit. So what I get back in feedback here, this is just some examples for you. So you'll see here, hopefully you can see my cursor. Resistance parameters means when I'm working in bigger spaces with players. Strength parameters means when I'm working in tighter, smaller spaces with players. So for instance, 4 days away from a game, I'm working strength parameters because that's probably the hardest session. It's the most damaging session on muscles. When I get the GPS back, the only feedback I want to know is all my players are in reds and oranges here. Okay. Then that tells me that the dimensions of my session, the areas that I was using were correct. Okay. That's all I want from a coaching point of view. I know if these reds here were moving into here, then I know my areas are maybe incorrect. Maybe they were too big. They were moving into resistance, which is the bigger spaces. So that's what I use GPS from a coaching point of view. And you can see match day 3, when I want it to be in the bigger spaces and away from the tighter spaces, this tells me here, again, whether my session, the areas that I set up, the sizes of those areas were right. And then match days, 2 days before the game, I don't want to have too much red or orange on there, because then that means I'm working too hard from a physical point of view. I'm tapering them. I'm working more on speed and agility at that point, as well as game preparations, shorter, sharper sessions. If I get in a lot of orange and a lot of red on these 2 areas here, that tells me, again, from a coaching point of view, that my session's wrong. Not that not that my sessions are dictated by physical. The football side of it, the coaching point of view will always overtake the physical for me, but I have to be conscious of what I'm doing from a physical point of view as well. So yeah, I'm skipping through that a little bit quicker than normal. And then into that, creating that right environment and culture for the team. So all those things that we've done before, hopefully you can remember some of them. Creating that environment, as well as me, the most important part of all of it is, no matter how good a coach you are or where you're at, the environment dictates everything. If you can get the right environment, a positive, hardworking, a development that's really vibrant environment, players will improve. You'll improve. If the environment's not right, you can be the best coach in the world. You can have the best tactics, the best training, whatever you want to do, but the environment and the culture will let it down. So this, for me, is obviously the most important one to get right. If I move on to it, so group values, and I'll just give you some examples of what I've used before in some of the teams that I've been at. It's really important when you're setting an environment and a group culture. As much as you've got a great idea of what a good culture looks like and a good environment looks like as a coach or a coaching team, it's the most important part is that the players' input is there the most. Yes, you can guide them smartly through certain meetings that you have, team meetings, unit meetings, or whatever, individual meetings, whatever it may be, and guide them to it. But it's hugely important that the players get to choose what type of environment they go into. They get ownership and accountability. That's the trick, is to give them that accountability, give them that ownership on the environment. And you can do that through very clever meetings where they talk, they split into small groups, they talk about the environment, what type of environment they want, how are they going to train, how do we train, why do we train like that, how are we going to do it? And then they come back and they deliver on those small groups. They stand up, they talk to each other, they deliver what they've spoke about. And that way you're forming their ownership, as well as the actual meetings actually dictating what they're doing. So you're guiding them there, but really they have the ownership. Competition in training is vitally important. How can I put friendly competition there, but competitive competition? If I can do anything with facilities, nutrition and travel, always helps the environment. Going back to organization, what I said at the start, schedules, communication, with whether that's with parents, players, whatever that may be, scheduling to the smallest detail is hugely important, makes a huge difference, again, to that environment. So just some examples, what I was talking about there with players, again, an example from Birmingham. this was designed by the players. I set those meetings. The only thing that I said to them in the meetings was that these 3 areas here, you see the training, match day, and social. Okay, those 3 areas is where we're going to spend all our time together. We're going to spend it in and around the training environment, in and around the match day environment, and then socially outside of where we are. This is where we're going to spend all of our time together. Okay, so the meeting was set up where, okay, if we know that these are the 3 areas that we're going to spend most of our time with each other, and we all have an agreement of commitment. I do a separate meeting on commitment. That's a non-negotiable commitment, and what that means and how that helps and what that does. But if these are the 3 areas, the meeting's set up for them to decide what 3 values that they want in those environments that mean the most to them as players. So for an example here with Birmingham, they chose that in those environments, the most important values to them to have for all of us was respect for one another, enjoyment, and winning. That was what they decided. That's what they wanted the most in those 3 environments from there. Okay, when they've decided the 3 values, okay, we then correlate it to which area. Okay, so, okay, you wanted respect. How does respect work in the training environment? And this is where they came up with. How does respect refer to match day environments? And this is what they believed respect was in match day environments. And then how does respect formulate into social areas together? And this is what they came up with. Okay, same with enjoyment. How enjoyment links to our training environment, our match day environment, and our social, which you can see here in this line. And then winning. How does that relate to in training? How does that relate we're in match day environments? And how does that relate in social? And I can tell you, this was the most, out of everything we did at Birmingham, where we had points deduction and financial troubles, they were bottom of the championship when I took over. The environment that was created there by the players was the best that I've been with, and that includes my playing career. In terms of, I've been lucky enough to be in some successful teams, but the environment that they created, and through this process we're guiding them into it, it was so strong in terms of what they got. I still have players now. I haven't been there. Obviously, I left there 4.5 years ago. I'd say 95% of that squad on a regular basis still in contact with, because of that environment that was set by them. And then all our job as staff or coaches is to uphold that standard. That's all we have to do. And the trick is, and this is the best bit, once they've decided it, once they've come up with that environment and what they're going to do in each of those areas that we're with each other, whenever they step across that line, because there will be days where they don't want to have respect in training, they don't want to have respect or enjoyment in match day or whatever it may be, is the best part of it is you don't have to send a rollicking, you don't have to get anything else. Is the best ammunition you have as a coach is when they're doing that, or they're crossing that line, or they're not doing one of these values, or they're not performing in one of these areas, is you can put it on them that they decided this. You decided this. So why are you doing this in this environment when you know that this is what's not done in this environment? And they try and come back and you say, you decided it. They've got no comeback. And that's the real trick in it, where the accountability and the ownership from them is clear and the whole group buy into it. So that went on a little bit long about that. Rules and conduct, codes of conduct, obviously at professional clubs with a lot of eyes on them on a constant basis, not just in the training areas, but outside of it more. Conducts and rules and conduct. Again, the same principle is a club will often have rules and code of conducts, but in terms of whether you're fining players or whatever, I allow the players to decide. Players will decide what punishments there are, if there are any punishments, or what the code of conduct should be. It goes hand in hand with the environment and the last slide of what you saw. Competition in training. This is just one example of what I've done. I've done many different things. We have competition tables, even at the professional level. This one here is in terms of points, in terms of certain parts of each training session. Not so much when we're leading right up to a game, the day before a game, or maybe even 2 days before a game, but the earlier parts of the week, definitely. But even sometimes on the day before a game, if we feel where we're at and how the group feel, we'll put competition in there. It might be one part of the session where it's daily, competition individually. and they gather points, and at the end of that month they win certain prizes, and if it's grassroots, you can win certain merchandise off the club shops or tickets to games or whatever it may be. But healthy competition where they can see it daily on scoreboards and stuff like that, as well as me, especially nowadays with the kids, that's where the interaction. But even at the professional level, just to give you an example, we play for £5 over here. A lot of times we put, basically the cost of it is certain players will win £5, certain players will lose £5. The scrap that they have, or the level of competitiveness for that £5 is ridiculous. And £5 doesn't buy you much over here anymore, but the competition levels are so high. Again, just trying to think of ways to create that competitive environment as well, where it can be enjoyable at the same time. And then scheduling, like I said to you, I give monthly. I work, I know it's not always as easy as that, depending on what organization you're at and the variability of it, and players turning up. Obviously, at the professional level, where we know what numbers we have in the squad, whether those players are training or not is a different matter. But schedules for staff, schedules for the organization, schedules for the players, where it's all in one. And I do monthly schedules where it's the best. Giving schedules out in advance, if possible, to parents, to players, to staff, because everyone does have a personal life outside of that. Being able to organize their lives around that schedule. Yes, schedules can change. So that's why you fill the schedule up as much as possible. And then the carrot is you take away. But I try and plan a month in advance and give these schedules to players, again, to create that environment and that culture of organization. And obviously they've got lives going on outside of football as well. So that's that part in terms of the environment. And then moving on to dealing with the media. So this is quite a hot topic, especially at the professional levels. This is one I'm more, which we'll touch on in a minute, share out to the group more often than not. But media is a really good way, social media or media interviews or whatever it is, really good way of implementing a message. So really what I try and say there, and the two that you remember, is it's been really clear. Every single interview you have, or every single social media post, not so much social media post unless it's personal, but if it's an interview or an article, whatever it is remember who you're representing. It's yourself, it's your staff, your player. It's not just you, it's everyone, that club. Especially when you're working in an organization, you're constantly representing them. So be aware of that. And then also, in a probably more selfish point of view, not that you're actively looking for other jobs when you're in a job, but especially if it's going through media, is understand that there's eyes on, everyone's watching, or certain people will be watching, certain owners or TDs or wherever it may be at other organizations. How you come across in those interviews or those articles and stuff like that is hugely important, maybe for somewhere further down the road. But remembering that, and every opportunity you get, I think it's really, really important. And then, I was going to talk about social media. Normally I throw this into the room at certain times, what we think about it, what our thoughts on it. Again, same thing, implementing messages on there. I think it's obviously a great way of connecting with fans. It's also a great way of squashing disinformation, a lot of rumors and things like that. But then it depends how much you want to get involved in that. Depends how much you rely on it. But I think it's something that we all know is part of the world now. It's only going to get bigger and stronger. There are concerns with it, with players, that we have to be mindful of, with the generations that we have now, in terms of seeking approval on it from randoms, seeking likes from it, from random people, rather than your closest units and the people that really matter, which is your family and your coach or your organization. So often this one's done as a debate. When obviously I present this, generally when we come in and we're face to face. And then the last bit is just the values to yourself. I think it's important to stick by your values. I think it's important to assess your values, but having strong values as a person, regardless of what job or you work in or what organization you work in, having strong values yourself, and believing in them and staying true to them in difficult moments. These are kind of just some that I hold myself to in terms of values that I really place value on. I don't want to be late for anything. I think if you think of me, I know it's different at the junior ages and stuff, like the real young ages, but let's get into the teenage years or late teenage years or elite part. We don't, if a player walks into our room after we're 10 minutes into a meeting, we're not happy as coaches. So how does that reflect if I walk into, or I'm late for a meeting? So I don't like to be late for anything. I only accept 100% because I give 100%. It's not that they always get to 100%, but if I can set an environment, or I can speak with them in a way where they can see why 100% is important, I think that's the only acceptable level to accept. Only if you give 100% yourself. I don't suffer any dickheads. I'm not interested in idiots. They can be I've had some of the most talented players I've worked with. I think that's an interesting debate on its own. I think with real talented players, I think the only way that you can carry on with talented players, but they're idiots, is and the only way the group will accept them is if they're winning them games. If they're constantly winning them games, I think they'll put up with them being an idiot, and you'll be able to manage that situation with the rest of the group. But if they're being an idiot and they're not helping you on the pitch, especially in match days, then you have to get rid. Constantly assessing what I do, constantly trying to refine it, trying to make it better, without the idea of I've got to come up with super duper ideas. I think, as coaches, we need to come up with all these different ideas and different. No, is assess and refine what best works. What's the best sessions? What's the best practices? And assess and refine them to get them the best, rather than just continuously coming up with new ones. Yes, it's important for freshness to add in new ideas, but assessing what works well and refining it, it's a no-brainer. That's what the best coaches, I've been lucky enough to go and watch some of the best coaches in the world train. They do the same session the majority of the time, obviously on different phases of the game, but they have real go-to sessions that they've refined and that constantly assess, but are delivering because they know that is what's working the best. And then they add in freshness here and there. I'm very open-minded. I love to keep learning. I'm sure some of you guys in a minute are going to tell me where I've gone wrong. And I've been talking too much. And then the other bit is, I think, just do it your way. Have all these things. Or if you take one of these things, but I'm just trying to give you a blueprint of, even if it's one of these things that you think about before you go and do it, or whatever it may be, or how to try and do it, is do it your way. Put your own stamp on those things. Yes, as coaches, we take ideas and we take things off other people and stuff like that, but make sure you interpret it into your way, whether that's the session might be someone else's, but how I deliver that and my personality and my language that I use is me. That's how you turn it into your way. It might be a coach. It might be a session that Pep Guardiola, I watched Pep Guardiola use, and I want to use that session, but I'm going to interpret it into my way, my language and my setup and my presence and how I deliver that. And then, and most of all, I guess whatever journey you're on, whatever organization you're at, is to enjoy the journey. We're all learning. I don't think it's ever going to stop. I have said, no, if you see me on a sideline at the professional levels, especially when I'm 70 years old, I think you've got permission to come and shoot me, because I don't think I can do it all the way up to those ages, but then I'm sure you'll see at some point anyway. But any questions that you guys may have, and thank you very much for listening. Hopefully the videos play well enough. If not, I can send them to you. But thank you very much for listening. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Garry. That was quite informative and very, very educational. I think it's always difficult when you transition from a player to a coach, because as a player, you're given all the information during the training session. When you become a coach, you now are the one who has to deliver the message and make sure all the information is clear to everybody. So I guess my only question from you is what was the hardest adjustment you had to do or experience from being a player to becoming a coach?
I think the first job at Swansea was my hardest. I'd been there 10 years as a player, and obviously you've got amazing relationships with the players and staff and everything, and they know you really well. They've seen you at your best and they've seen you at your worst on your socials and stuff like that. So I've always said that'll be my hardest job, because I was so emotionally attached to it. So separating those relationships where, I had those relationships with players I knew really well. And then obviously as I'm starting to recruit new players who don't know me as that, who only know me as the coach, is it was really hard to try and move towards being a coach in terms of those lines that you don't cross or those boundaries that you have, because I didn't have any boundaries with a lot of those players that I knew really well. And now I'm putting in boundaries more to show the players that don't know me like that there has to be certain boundaries and certain respect levels and whatever it may be. Is I think I found that really hard. I think the players that I knew really well found that really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And although that I was really respected, I found that eventually, because again, what didn't help me, it was a lot of those 3 or 4 of those players that I had a really good relationship were coming towards the end of their cycle as a player for that club. And it happened to be my time in after that first full season where I had to be the one to tell them that their cycle's coming to the end. So you can imagine 10 years of being a great teammate, great friend, and now I'm the one that's telling them that they've got to move on, basically, or they won't be playing as much, and new players and younger players are going to be coming in and stuff like that. That was really hugely difficult, and a lot of those friendships suffered. And I think was a big contributing factor to that following season, where the first season we broke all those records, the most points tally in the Premier League that Swansea had ever had, and most goals and all those sort of things. I think in that second season, when I had to tell them a few of that, I think that's what's really was, I suppose, ultimately my downfall. But that's something I couldn't really control. I had to move away into that coach. I'm now, I've got a good 16, 18 months behind me as the manager of a Premier League team. I've got new players coming in the building. I have to be seen to be a professional manager. Yes, I'm still myself and my personality, but I think it was those decisions on those players. So that was a big learning curve for me. I think it's been easier from that perspective in all the other clubs that I've gone to, because I haven't had those previous relationships. So they only know me as the coach and stuff like that. So that's been easier. And I think the other bit, that's a lot of what I had to learn the most. But then I think the other bit is just the knowledge. I came straight from playing, and yes, I was doing my coaching badges. I was very interested in coaching, and I was writing down sessions. I was speaking to managers that we had, and they were really lucky with like your Brendan Rodgers and your Roberto Martinez, who have now gone on to, great things. They gave me good insight. I could sit with them after trainings because they knew I was interested, and ask them, why did you speak to that player like that? Or why did you put that session like that, or whatever. So I was very lucky, but nothing really prepares you when you're doing it. So I've been learning those first 2-3 years. The hardest bit was learning on the job. I had to learn all those different departments that we just talked about. I wasn't an expert in all of them, any of them, apart from having a good base level as a player of football. But you're right, I had to learn everything, and I had to do it in the danger zone of working at in those levels with media and all those things on me. And it's like, but I wouldn't change it now. I kind of regretted it at moments during it, thinking, oh geez, this is just crazy. But now I look back, I think like I dealt with that well. I've gained so much knowledge from it, from being in those situations. I've been out of my comfort zone for the past 6, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years. I'm used to being out of my comfort zone. And I think that set me up as a coach. I often put myself out of my comfort zone when I go and do I've done quite a few masterclasses, for instance, and I'll turn up, I won't prepare anything. I'll tell I'll ask the coaches, what topic do you want to do? What do you want me to deliver? And that's totally out of your comfort zone. I'm under pressure. I've got 10 minutes to prepare a session. I don't know what numbers I've got, blah, blah, blah. But I think as coaches, as much as we can be out of our comfort zone and do it in front of people, and I don't care if I embarrass myself and I muck up. I don't really care. I think from a coaching point of view, when I get the right time to do that, is do it. So that when you come to actually performing, you're gaining knowledge all the time. So I've ended up doing that in a real pressure cooker environment in terms of under the spotlight I've been under. But I wouldn't change it. I've learned a lot, and yeah, I've got a few more grey hairs for sure. You can see the grey hairs right there. I used to be 20. I used to be looking the young 20. Now I look about 50 odd years old. So it does come with side effects. Again, I just want to share. I feel like I've gained all this knowledge, and also from my brother's network and my network I've gained all that knowledge and all these expertise and stuff like that. I've always felt at the elite, the professional levels, the elite levels, there's been a real unwillingness to share, especially over here in Europe, because they don't share programs or what they're doing behind the scenes in their academies, all the youth levels. I've always hated that, even though I've been part of that. So I want to share. So our platform, Soccer Profile, is really player and coach development led. A lot of resource, a lot of education resource, a lot of obviously functional resource and stuff like that. And that's the platform that we have. And yeah, doing as much as these type of things as I can to try and share, my experience and help us all. I think we should all be helping each other.
Absolutely. We're a community of coaches that need to work together to improve and to provide the best learning environment for all the players. I'm a firm believer of that.
I said I just want to share. Hopefully, I think that's what we should do as coaches. Make the effort to share. I think that's the most important bit.
That was outstanding, Gary. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Fantastic presentation.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. I love it. I love these things, but the thing is, it's like you can tell that these type of things are better when you're in front of everyone and their interactions there. And yeah, I'm sure they've been polite today with their questions.
Oh, you have one there. There's a question there, Valer. I don't know if you saw it from Joe.
It says, I think that for a manager to gain success, you need to be well surrounded, especially your closest staff around you. Do you agree? And did you happen to be forced to work with staff that being forced to your group staff and don't necessarily be on the same level as you regarding values and gate mantle standpoint?
Yeah, that's very true. I think my last role, head coach at Sheffield Wednesday, was exactly that situation. I'd left Birmingham and then gone straight into Sheffield Wednesday in the Championship, and I didn't have, the only staff member I had was my analyst that's been with me everywhere, and I had to work with their staff, their technical staff, and obviously all the staff underneath that and stuff like that, and that was really difficult. But like I said to you before, I'm always the type that will. That was purely because I couldn't get my staff to me that I wanted there, and a little bit of part of the agreement with the owner there, where I had to take on board their staff, and that was hugely important because it wasn't fair on them and it wasn't fair on me. They didn't know how I train or how I deliver and what I do, and so I'm going straight into it. We're already playing games, so I had to go back to delivering everything myself. I was delivering everything myself and trying to educate them at the same time and give them enough to make them feel involved until I could train them up. But you don't get a lot of time doing that. And then the other part is you can't control the message. Often when you have your own staff and the people around you and they're on the same page, is the message that's going out in the corridors, in the canteens, in the physio rooms, in the medical rooms, as well as on the pitch, is the same message. Everyone's keeping that message on board. Whereas with staff that you don't know and you can't control, that might have been there for a while, it was really difficult because I might be saying one thing in front of players or staff. I can't control what's being said, canteens and corridors and stuff like that. And I think that was an amazing experience, but a hugely difficult one, but one I learned a lot from. I managed it as best I possibly could. I was so drained from it. It was ridiculous. But it was like 24/7, it was just constant. I was just trying to manage it. You can only manage those situations the best you can. And you can only keep eyes on what you can. But I think, that's definitely commonplace. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have faced that situation as well. But as much as you can bring the people in with you or educate people in there or find good ones in there that really are on board with what you want to do and help them, I think that's the best way to go about it.
Perfect. So I think we're going to wrap it up. Gary, thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Thanks very much for having me. Been a pleasure. And I'll see you soon.
We will.
Yeah. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.